Let's keep this professional. The chair scraped back before Celeste's brain had finished processing what her eyes were sending it. It was a small sound, just the legs of a conference room chair dragging 2 inches across a polished concrete floor. But Priya heard it and glanced sideways, and the woman presenting at the front of the room paused for exactly half a second before continuing her sentence. And in that half second, Celeste counted 3 things. The particular way Ingrid Voss stood when she wanted to appear relaxed, one hand resting on the back of a chair and the other loose at her side. The fact that Ingrid's hair was shorter now, cut to just below her jaw, still that specific shade of dark blonde that looked different in every kind of light. And the moment, precise as a pin drop, when Ingrid's eyes found hers across the room, and something moved through them, fast and controlled, like a hand smoothing a wrinkle from a bedsheet. The coffee in front of Celeste was untouched. It had been untouched for 11 minutes, which was how long she had been sitting in this room listening to the HR onboarding specialist explain benefits packages and remote work policy. And in those 11 minutes she had been certain, completely, stupidly certain, that the worst thing about her first day at Threshold Studio would be remembering everyone's name. Ingrid Voss let 3 seconds pass. Then she said, in a voice that Celeste recognized the way you recognize a scar you've had so long you forget it's there. "Welcome, everyone. I'm Ingrid, Director of Product. We're glad to have you." She looked at Celeste for exactly the same amount of time she looked at the other 2 new hires. Not less, not more. Let's keep this professional. Priya's laptop kept typing. The HR specialist resumed her slide deck. The coffee went cold. Celeste didn't move for a long time. Before we go any further, if this story already has you by the throat, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The full version of what happened in Portland, what was said in that hotel hallway, what Ingrid whispered that she had no business saying. That story lives on Patreon, where we tell the ones that can't be told here. Link is in the video description and pinned in the first comment. Come find us. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because to understand what happened in that conference room, you need to understand what happened 3 years before it. Seattle in October has a specific quality of light that Celeste had been warned about and had not believed. It wasn't the rain. She'd grown up in Michigan. Rain was not a revelation. It was the way the clouds sat low and flat over the water, pressing the city into a kind of silver compression, everything muted except for the brief, violent gold of the leaves still clinging to the maples along Eastlake. She had driven into the city on a Sunday morning with her car packed to the roof and a playlist she hadn't updated in 4 years, and she had thought, okay, new city, new job, new geometry. The geometry of Portland had become unbearable. She had lived there for 6 years, arrived at 25 for a UX position at a mid-sized tech company, stayed because the food was good and the rent was still survivable, and because she had met, in the 2nd year, a woman named Ingrid Voss at a design conference in the Pearl District, and that had seemed for a long time like a sufficient reason to stay anywhere. They had been together for 3 years. Not quietly, not casually, the kind of together that rearranges your life without announcing it, that shows up in the small decisions. Whose coffee grinder to keep? Which side of the bed is yours? The particular shorthand of long proximity. Celeste had learned to read the angle of Ingrid's shoulders in a meeting before Ingrid said a word. Ingrid had learned to leave Celeste alone in the first hour after she woke up, which was a form of intimacy that felt, at the time, like being deeply known. What had happened between them was not dramatic. That was the part that still made Celeste's jaw tighten 3 years later, in a car headed north on I-5 with all her furniture in storage. It had not been a scene. There had been no discovery, no betrayal, no single catastrophic event that she could point to and say, there. That is where it broke. What there had been was a conversation in a kitchen at 11 at night, standing on opposite sides of the island. And Ingrid had said, very calmly, that she thought they had stopped growing toward each other and had started growing in parallel, and that she wasn't sure how much longer she could pretend not to notice, Celeste had said, "So what does that mean?" And Ingrid had said, "I think you know." And the terrible thing was that she had known. That was the thing she could not forgive. Not Ingrid, but the part of herself that had known. She had stayed in Portland for another 8 months after that, which was a specific kind of punishment she hadn't known she was capable of inflicting on herself. Then a recruiter had emailed about a senior UX role at a design studio in Seattle, and she had thought, okay, new city. She had told herself it was professional growth. She had believed it approximately 60% of the time. The job was real, and it was good. Threshold Studio had a reputation she respected. Clean work, interesting clients, a design culture that hadn't curdled into performative minimalism. The offer was generous. The timing was, she had thought, exactly right. She had not known about Ingrid because she had not asked. Because asking would have required knowing that there was something to ask about. And knowing that would have required keeping tabs. And keeping tabs would have meant admitting that the geometry of Ingrid Voss still occupied more of her internal architecture than a woman who had ended things in a kitchen 3 years ago had any right to. The hiring manager's name had been listed as D. Park. All the emails before the offer letter had come from D. Park. The offer letter had come from HR. The welcome email had said, "You'll be reporting into the product design team, supervised by I. Voss." Celeste had read that on a Thursday night, 1 week before her start date, sitting in her new apartment on Capitol Hill, with boxes still stacked against every wall. She had read it 3 times. Then she had closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. She had not considered withdrawing. She had considered it for approximately 4 minutes, and then stopped, because withdrawing would have required explaining why, and explaining why would have required saying Ingrid's name to someone at the company, and she was not going to do that. She was going to walk into that building on Monday morning and be competent and professional and completely unbothered. She had rehearsed this. She had rehearsed it the way you rehearse a difficult conversation. Running it on a loop, adjusting the timing, smoothing the rough edges. She had imagined the moment of first contact as something she could manage, a thing with edges she could grip. She had not imagined the chair scraping back. Priya Menon had been at Threshold for 2 years and had developed, in that time, a precise taxonomy of office dynamics that she considered one of her more underrated professional skills. She could identify a territorial art director from across a lunch line. She could read the specific silence that preceded a bad sprint review. She could tell, within 48 hours of someone starting, whether they were going to be a person who made the job easier or harder. Celeste, she decided by Tuesday afternoon, was going to be complicated in an interesting way. The interesting part was the work. Celeste's portfolio was exceptional, cleaner than most of what Threshold had been producing, with a research methodology that Priya had spent 20 minutes examining in genuine admiration. She moved through problems the way people with real craft move through them. Not fast, but absolutely sure of each step. The complicated part was Ingrid. Priya had been watching it for 2 days, and she still didn't have a clean read on what she was watching. It wasn't hostility. There was nothing sharp between them, no visible friction. It was closer to weather. The way a room could feel before a storm without any single cloud you could point to. Ingrid ran team stand-up on Tuesday morning with the same precise efficiency she always did, and Celeste participated fully, and they agreed on 3 action items. And at no point did either of them look at the other, for longer than professionally necessary. It was that last part that finally told Priya what she was looking at. Nobody is that careful with a stranger. She waited until Wednesday afternoon, when she and Celeste were both ostensibly reviewing a user flow document and actually eating smuggled dumplings from the place 2 blocks away that Priya had introduced her to on day 2. "So," Priya said, not looking up from her screen. "Ingrid." Celeste's chopsticks paused. "What about her? You tell me." A silence that lasted slightly too long. "We know each other. From before. It's not a thing." "Right," Priya said. "It's really not." "Okay. We dated," Celeste said. In Portland. It ended 3 years ago. It's fine. Priya set down her chopsticks with the care of someone handling something fragile. So when she said, "Let's keep this professional on day 1, she was being professional. She rehearsed that sentence. You don't know that. Celeste. Priya looked at her directly. I have sat 3 feet from that woman for 2 years. She does not make unplanned statements in group settings. She rehearsed it. Celeste looked at her screen. Something in her jaw moved. Well, she said after a moment, so did I. The Ardmore project came down from above with the specific gravity of something that had been decided before the meeting to discuss it had been scheduled. Ardmore Pharmaceutical wanted a full platform redesign, patient-facing portal, provider interface, internal dashboard, and they were willing to pay accordingly, which meant Threshold was willing to prioritize accordingly, which meant the project got the 2 people whose portfolios had the most direct relevance. Those 2 people were Ingrid and Celeste. Priya found out in the same stand-up where Celeste found out, and she had the presence of mind to watch Celeste's face for the 4 seconds between Ingrid announcing the team composition and the moment Celeste's expression settled back into professional neutrality. 4 seconds was, Priya thought, actually impressive. Most people couldn't have done it in under 8. Ingrid, for her part, delivered the announcement with the clean efficiency of someone reading a weather report. Celeste will lead research and UX architecture. I'll handle client relationship and product strategy. We'll have daily syncs at 9. She paused. Any questions? Celeste said. What's the timeline to first deliverable? Ingrid said, 3 weeks to wireframes. And that was that. What followed was the most technically proficient misery Celeste had experienced since graduate school. The work was genuinely interesting, which made it worse. She could not be bored, could not let her mind drift, because the problems were complex enough to require actual attention. And actual attention meant being in the same room as Ingrid, for hours at a time, reading the same documents, debating the same wireframes, and learning all over again the specific rhythm of how Ingrid thought. She had forgotten, or told herself she had forgotten. She had not forgotten. Ingrid thought in systems. She mapped the connections between things before she named the things themselves. She would sit in a meeting and be silent for stretches that made clients visibly nervous, and then she would say one sentence that repositioned everything that had come before it. And Celeste would recognize the sentence not because she had heard it before, but because she had watched it being assembled. This was worse than hostility would have been. Hostility she could have managed. What she could not manage was the terrible familiarity of watching someone think. They were careful with each other in a way that required constant maintenance. Every exchange was professional, precise, occasionally warm in the way that good colleagues are warm. They never slipped into the shorthand they'd once had. They referred to each other by first name with a consistency that started to feel deliberate. They did not eat lunch at the same time. Priya watched all of this with the expression of someone watching a slow-motion car accident and said, on a Thursday evening over drinks, that this was the most exhausting thing she had ever witnessed professionally, and she had once managed a rebrand during a hostile acquisition. What would you like me to do about it? Celeste said. I don't know, Priya said. Something, anything. Say one true thing in her presence. I say true things constantly. Everything I say to her is true. You know what I mean? Celeste turned her glass on the bar. The project will be over in 6 weeks. And then you'll work here for years, Priya said, with her 10 feet away, doing this. I'm great at this. You're exhausting yourself, Priya said. I can see it. You look like someone who hasn't slept in a week, except you're sleeping fine, which means you're spending all your sleep hours getting ready for the next day. This was accurate enough that Celeste finished her drink without answering. The Portland trip was Ardmore's idea, technically. They had a regional office there, and they wanted the design team to spend 2 days doing in-person research with their staff. Actual on-site observation, contextual inquiry, the kind of thing you couldn't replicate remotely. It was a reasonable request. It was good research practice. It was also, and this was the part Celeste sat with for a long time after the calendar invite arrived, a flight to Portland with Ingrid Voss and 2 nights in a hotel in the Pearl District, which was the neighborhood where they had met. She had told Priya, who had said, "Oh, the universe is unhinged," and then, "Do you want me to come? You're not on the project. I could be. I could add a lot of value." Priya, "I'm just saying I have great instincts, and I would be an excellent buffer, and also, I have never been to Portland." Celeste had smiled despite herself, which Priya had correctly identified as victory. She had gone to Portland without Priya. The first day was clean. Research is research, and they were both good at it. Settling into rooms with Ardmore's clinical staff, watching workflows, asking questions, taking notes with the kind of parallel efficiency that comes from 2 people who have developed, without meaning to, a shared methodology. By the end of the day, they had more material than they'd gotten from 3 weeks of remote sessions, and over dinner at a restaurant near the hotel. Separate menus, shared data review, entirely professional. Celeste had thought, maybe this was actually going to be fine. The second day was when it rained. Not unusual for Portland. The rain came in the afternoon, the heavy Pacific Northwest kind that doesn't announce itself. And by the time they were finished with the last research session, it was dark, and the streets were slick, and neither of them had an umbrella, because neither of them had thought to check the weather, which was an interesting failure from 2 people whose entire professional identity was built on research. The hotel was 4 blocks. They walked fast, and they didn't talk. And by the time they pushed through the lobby doors, they were both thoroughly wet, and the absurdity of it broke something small and necessary in the armor they'd been maintaining for 3 weeks. Ingrid laughed first. It was a short sound, surprised out of her, the sound of someone who had not meant to find anything funny and couldn't help it. Celeste turned and looked at her, water dripping from her coat, and Ingrid was standing in the hotel lobby laughing with her eyes slightly wide, as though the laugh had ambushed her, and Celeste felt something shift in her chest that she was not prepared for. "I'm sorry," Ingrid said, composing herself. "I don't know why that's funny." "We're both soaked," Celeste said. "Yes. We make a living noticing things." "Yes." Ingrid looked at her. The lobby was warm and quiet, and the rain was still loud against the glass doors. "We do." They stood there for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. Then Ingrid said she was going to change and they could debrief in an hour if that worked. And Celeste said that worked, and they took separate elevators. And Celeste stood in her room staring at the wall for several minutes before she turned on the shower. If this story is pulling something out of you that you don't have words for yet, you're not alone. The ones that really land, the ones that follow you home, those live somewhere else. Our Patreon has stories we can't tell on YouTube, raw, unfiltered, uncensored. The link is in the video description and pinned in the first comment. Every story there exists because someone showed up and made it possible. Come be part of that. Now, the hotel hallway, the thing Ingrid said. They debriefed for 90 minutes in the hotel's small business center, a room with 1 table, 2 chairs, and the kind of fluorescent light that flattens everything. They were professional. They were good. The debrief was genuinely productive, surfacing 3 insights that neither of them had been positioned to see from their individual notes, which was the specific value of working with someone whose mind moved differently from yours. When they finished, Ingrid closed her laptop and said, "This was good work today." "It was," Celeste said. A pause. The fluorescent light hummed. "I want to say something," Ingrid said. Celeste looked up from packing her bag. "I want to say that I know the situation isn't... I know it's been a difficult few weeks, and I want you to know that I think you've handled it with real professionalism. It hasn't been easy on my side either, and I'm aware that the way I..." She stopped, restarted. "I want you to know that I'm aware of the difficulty. It was the most words Ingrid had directed at anything non-project related in 3 weeks. Celeste set her bag down. "Okay," she said. "I thought it needed to be said. Ingrid." Celeste said her name with more weight than she'd meant to. It landed in the room with an audible thud, and Ingrid went very still. "What happened to us? You don't owe me an apology for that." "I know. It was mutual. It was complicated. It ended." "I know." Ingrid was looking at her with something Celeste recognized from years ago. The expression Ingrid made when she was trying to decide whether to say the thing she was actually thinking or the thing it was wise to say. "I know. I'm not apologizing for the ending." "Then what are you doing?" A silence. "I don't know," Ingrid said. "I've been in this city for 2 days and I can't—" She stopped, looked at the table. "I forgot how much this city sounds like you." It was the sentence she shouldn't have said. They both knew it immediately. It landed between them like something dropped from a height. Not explosive, but with a kind of resonance that took time to decay. Celeste sat very still. "Ingrid." "I know," Ingrid said. "I know, I'm sorry. Forget I said that. You can't unsay it." "I know." They looked at each other across a bad hotel table in a fluorescent room in a city that had used to belong to both of them, and Celeste thought about 3 years, and the kitchen island, and the specific silence of an apartment after someone takes their half of the things out of it. "I'm going to go to my room," she said. Her voice was entirely steady. This surprised her. Ingrid nodded. "Good night, Ingrid." "Good night, Celeste." She walked to the elevator and pushed the button and stood there and did not turn around. And the doors opened and she got in, and the whole way up to the 5th floor, she kept her eyes on the number above the door, watching it increment, and she thought, "I forgot how much this city sounds like you." And she did not know, in the elevator, whether what she felt was grief or the specific relief of something finally named. They flew back to Seattle on a Thursday morning. Weather delay at PDX, a ground stop for 40 minutes, both of them sitting in the same gate area with their laptops open and their headphones on, and the particular Seattle-Portland shuttle crowd around them moving with the resigned patience of people who did this all the time. Celeste had been working for 20 minutes when she became aware that Ingrid had stopped typing. She didn't look up, kept her eyes on the prototype she was annotating. Ingrid's not typing continued for another 30 seconds. "Can I ask you something?" Ingrid said. Celeste took out one earbud. "Sure." "Do you regret taking this job?" The gate area hum continued around them. An announcement about a gate change for a flight to Boise. "No," Celeste said. "Even with— No." She looked at Ingrid directly. "The work is good. The team is good. I made the right call." Ingrid nodded slowly, looking at the window, at the planes on the wet tarmac. "I thought about telling you," she said. "When I knew you'd been hired. I thought about it for 2 weeks. Whether to reach out, whether to say something before." "Why didn't you?" A pause. "I didn't know what to say. And let's keep this professional was easier." Something moved through Ingrid's face. "I rehearsed that for 4 days," she said. "I still don't know if it was the right thing to say. It was the professional thing to say. Those aren't always the same." Celeste looked at her for a long moment. "No," she said. "They're not." The boarding announcement came. They gathered their things and moved to the line with the same unhurried efficiency they brought to everything, and Celeste thought about what it meant that Ingrid had spent 2 weeks deciding whether to warn her, and 4 days rehearsing a sentence, and that she herself had rehearsed her own response, and that they had both walked into that conference room armed with their prepared lines and their professional distance, and the whole thing had still landed like a truck. "You can rehearse anything," she thought, "and it doesn't mean you're ready." Back in Seattle, the Ardmore project entered its final sprint, and the intimacy of the Portland trip settled over their working dynamic, like a change in atmospheric pressure. Nothing visible, but everything slightly different. They were still professional. They were still good. But the layer of extra carefulness had thinned, and they had stopped performing the ignoring each other and started doing the thing that is actually harder, acknowledging each other as real. Small things. Ingrid started pushing back on Celeste's wireframe decisions and stand-up with the specific quality of disagreement that meant she was taking the work seriously, not managing it. Celeste started arriving at the 9 o'clock sync 30 seconds early, which was the minimum unit of intentionality. They ate lunch in the same vicinity twice. Priya noticed. "Something happened in Portland," she said on a Tuesday morning, with the confident flatness of someone not asking a question. "Nothing happened. Something shifted. You're less brittle." "I was never brittle." "You were like a load-bearing wall pretending to be a window." Priya looked at her. "What happened?" Celeste thought about a fluorescent room and a sentence that had no business being said. "She said something honest," she said. "And then I went to my room." Priya considered this. "That's it?" "That's it. And nothing. But it mattered." "Because?" Celeste was quiet for a moment. "Because 3 years ago we were very good at not saying the honest thing until it was too late. And she said it. Even though it made things, even though it opened something she didn't know how to close." She picked up her coffee. It mattered. Priya was quiet, which for Priya was significant. Then, "You still love her." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Celeste looked at her screen. "The project presents to Ardmore in 9 days. Let's get through that first." "That's not a no," Priya said. "It's a not yet," Celeste said. Then she looked at her own screen, surprised, because she had not planned to say that, and she had not known it was true until it came out of her mouth. Not yet. Not a no. The Ardmore presentation was the best work Threshold had delivered in a year, which Celeste knew not because anyone told her, but because she could tell from the room. She had been in enough presentations to read the quality of attention, whether a client was politely listening or actually watching, and the Ardmore executives were watching in the way that meant the work had done something to them, had made them see their own platform differently. Ingrid presented the strategy. Celeste presented the research and the architecture. They had rehearsed it twice, and it ran clean. No fumbles, no dropped handoffs. The transitions between their sections moving with the ease of people who had learned to read each other's timing. Afterward, the lead client said, with the particular satisfaction of a difficult person who has been correctly handled, "This is what we were hoping for." In the elevator going down afterward, just the two of them, the rest of the team had taken the stairs. Ingrid said, looking at the doors, "Good work today." "You too," Celeste said. The elevator moved. The city came up through the glass wall. South Lake Union, the water, the gray October sky doing its particular silver thing. "I've been thinking," Ingrid said. "Okay." "About whether—" She stopped, adjusted. "The project's done. We don't have to share the daily sync anymore." "Right. So the professional necessity of the arrangement is resolved." Celeste looked at the side of her face. "Ingrid, I'm getting there." "I know, I'm just—" She stopped herself. The elevator reached the lobby. Neither of them moved toward the door. It stayed open. "I have been trying for 6 weeks to want something reasonable," Ingrid said, still looking at the doors. "And I cannot get there." The lobby sounds came in. Celeste let the elevator doors close again. They stood in the small stopped car. "What do you want?" she said. Ingrid turned and looked at her. "I don't know how to answer that without—" "Yes, you do." A long moment. Ingrid's eyes were the same color they had always been. The kind of gray that looks different depending on what's behind it. Slate in winter light, and almost green in summer. Celeste had not let herself look directly at them for 6 weeks. "I don't want to make the same mistakes," Ingrid said. "Which ones?" "The one where I stop saying the real thing because it feels safer. The one where I confuse growing in the same direction with growing together." She looked at Celeste with the directness of someone who has spent a very long time rehearsing the wrong speech and has finally set it down. "I want to find out if it's different now. I think it would be. I think we are." "The lobby sounds," Celeste said. "That is a very reasonable thing to want. I told you I wasn't going to make the reasonable case. It's reasonable, and it's honest. Both can be true." She held Ingrid's gaze. "You should have emailed me when you found out I'd been hired, not, 'Let's keep this professional.' You should have emailed me and said, 'I work there. I want us to be okay. Can we talk before Monday?'" Ingrid was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I should have. Don't do that again." "I won't." The elevator doors opened again, prompted by something in the building system, and this time they both stepped out into the lobby, into the gray Seattle afternoon, into the place where everything was still unresolved and nothing was declared, and the only thing that had actually happened was a true sentence spoken in a stopped elevator, which was, Celeste had spent enough time in the ruins of things to know, more than it sounded like. She was at her desk the next morning at 8:42, which was slightly earlier than her usual, and she had been there for 11 minutes. She knew because she had checked when she heard the specific rhythm of Ingrid's walk behind her. She did not turn around. Ingrid set something on the desk beside her keyboard. A coffee cup. One of the good ones from the cart in the lobby, not the office machine. She didn't say anything. She didn't explain. She walked back to her own desk. Celeste looked at the cup for a moment. She could see, across the open office, that Ingrid was also holding one, was settling into her chair with the focused deliberateness of someone who has done something intentional and is now giving it room to breathe. Celeste picked up the coffee. It was warm. She took a sip, and it was correct. The exact order she'd given to the lobby cart on her 3rd day, which meant Ingrid had either noticed or had asked someone. And either way, it was a kind of attention that she recognized. She turned back to her screen, opened her files, began to work. Across the office, nothing was said. There was no declaration, no clarification, no conversation that would have to be had out loud. There were just 2 coffees and 2 people doing their jobs in the same room, which was what they had been doing for 6 weeks. Except that this morning the carefulness was gone, and what was left was something quieter and more durable. The kind of ordinary that has been earned. The kind of ordinary that costs something. Outside, Seattle pressed its silver morning light against the windows. Somewhere below on Eastlake, the maples had lost most of their leaves, but not all. Celeste had 11 tabs open, and a wireframe to revise, and a new project brief in her inbox that she hadn't read yet. She thought about the elevator, and about a kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, and about all the distance between then and now. The geography of it, the time of it, the work of it. She thought about whether the things that had pulled them apart were the same as the things that were still there, or different, or both. She didn't have an answer. That was probably the honest thing. That there was no clean answer, only the next conversation, and the one after that, and the ongoing choice, which was not one choice, but many small ones made in the same direction. On the other side of the office, Ingrid's keyboard had started. The sound of it was familiar in a way that had nothing to do with 6 weeks of daily syncs. Celeste started to type too. 2 coffees, no explanation, no declaration. Just the choice to show up and let the other person see it. There's something in that I think we all recognize. The moment when someone stops performing okay and starts being present. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for credit. it just arrives. If this story stayed with you, if something in it named something you've been carrying, I want you to know that the ones that go even deeper are waiting for you on Patreon. Stories that can't exist on YouTube. Unfiltered, exclusive, and real in the way that only the ones we can't make public tend to be. The link is in the description and pinned in the first comment. Every like, every subscriber, every person who shows up, you're the reason these stories get told. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs it.